I never thought my name would fade from the lips of the man I gave my whole world to. My name is Nayeli, 74 winters old now. And the memories I've carried could fill rivers. People see an old woman sitting by her window, staring at nothing. But what they don't see is the love that once burned so bright inside me that I gave up everything. My dreams, my youth, my own name, to make his shine. Before I tell you my story, let me ask you something from the bottom of my worn heart. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you forgot who you were, just to help them become who they wanted to be? If you've ever given your all to someone who left you behind, then stay with me till the end. And please, if my words reach your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because somewhere there's another Nayeli waiting to be heard. Now, let me take you back to when I was still a girl who believed love could conquer everything. I was born in a small reservation town where dreams were a luxury and love was all we had to hold on to. My father carved wooden flutes and my mother sold beadwork by the roadside. Life was simple, but I carried fire in me. I wanted to study medicine, to become the first woman from my tribe to wear that white coat and heal our people. Every night I'd stare at the stars and whisper, "One day." Then came Eli. He was everything my quiet world wasn't: loud, confident, ambitious. He wanted to leave the reservation, study engineering in the city, and make something of himself. The first time I saw him, he was fixing an old motorcycle behind the trading post, grease on his hands, sunlight in his eyes. He looked up at me and said, "You're staring, little dreamer." I didn't know then how right he was. We were young and foolish, but we believed love could feed us. We'd sit by the lake and talk about our futures. He'd say, "Nayeli, when I graduate, I'll come back for you. I'll build us a house right here by the water." I'd smile, tracing the outline of his hand in mine, believing every word. But dreams have a cruel way of asking for sacrifices. When the scholarship papers came for me, yes, me, not him, I froze. I'd worked so hard for it, but Eli's eyes told me what he couldn't say. He had applied too, and been rejected. The silence between us that night was heavier than any storm. He finally said, "You deserve it, Nayeli. You'll go. You'll make your family proud." But his voice trembled like he was losing something he couldn't replace. That night, I couldn't sleep. I looked at the scholarship letter again and again, imagining the life I'd dreamed of. But I also saw Eli, his rough hands, his broken hopes, his pride, and in my heart, something broke. I told myself love meant sacrifice. The next morning, I walked to the post office and tore that letter into pieces. The clerk looked at me like I was mad, but I told her it was a mistake. I told Eli later that they had withdrawn my offer. He hugged me tight, his body trembling with relief. "Then we'll build our dreams together," he whispered. I smiled, but a part of me died that day. To help Eli get to the city, I worked day and night. I sold my mother's beadwork, took cleaning jobs, and even pawned my grandmother's turquoise necklace, the only heirloom she'd left me. Every penny went to his tuition, his books, his future. I told him it was temporary, that one day, when he made it big, he'd help me finish school too. He'd always nod and say, "Of course, my Nayeli, you'll have everything one day." But one day never came. Eli left for the city, and the first few months were full of letters. He'd write about his classes, his dreams, his loneliness. Then the letters slowed down and eventually stopped. My heart told me something was wrong, but I kept believing. I told my mother, "He's just busy." She'd sigh and say softly, "Child, busy people still make time for love." A year passed, then two. I heard rumors. He'd met someone, a city girl with soft hands and polished shoes. I refused to believe it. Not my Eli, not after everything I'd given. When I finally saved enough to visit him, I took the bus to the city. My hands trembled as I carried a basket of his favorite bread. I found his address, room 2B, a small apartment building near the university. When the door opened, a woman stood there in his shirt. She looked at me with confusion. Then Eli appeared behind her, and the look on his face told me everything before he said a word. "Nayeli, you shouldn't have come." Those 5 words still echo in my bones. He said she was his fiancée now, that his life had changed, that I belonged to another world. I felt my knees weaken, my breath stolen by betrayal. I wanted to scream, to remind him of every sacrifice, every dream I'd buried for him. But all I said was, "I hope she's worth what you've lost." Then I turned away, leaving the basket by the door. The bread went cold, but my tears burned. That was the day love turned to ashes. But what Eli didn't know was that sometimes life has a way of bringing back what you thought was gone, and sometimes it makes you face what you tried so hard to erase, because years later, when he thought I was long forgotten, fate brought us face to face again on a day that would change everything. Years passed like dust carried by the wind. Seasons changed, faces faded, and love turned into something I only visited in dreams. I stayed in our small town, working in the same diner where travelers stopped for coffee and warmth. I told myself I was content, that a quiet life was safer than one filled with hope. But sometimes, when the radio played old love songs, I'd find my hands trembling, as if the strings of my heart still remembered the melody of his voice. I never married. People said I was foolish, that a woman shouldn't waste her life on a ghost. Maybe they were right, but part of me believed that if I stayed true, somehow the universe would reward that kind of love. I didn't realize then how cruelly it could twist that faith. One cold winter morning, the diner door opened and a group of men walked in. Their laughter filled the room. One of them caught my eye, and for a moment the years vanished. His hair was grayer, his face heavier, but those eyes, those same dark eyes that once looked at me like I was his whole world. Eli. He didn't recognize me at first. Why would he? Time had weathered my face, lined it with stories he never cared to read. But when I said his name softly, Eli, he froze. The laughter around him died. He turned, eyes widening with disbelief. "Nayeli?" I smiled gently, though my heart felt like a trembling leaf. "You remember me," I said. He stepped closer, searching my face as if trying to confirm I was real. I thought you left town," he stammered. "I never knew you stayed." "Oh, I stayed," I whispered, "right where you left me." His friends exchanged glances, sensing the tension. He cleared his throat, muttered something about meeting them later, and sat down at one of the booths. For a few seconds, silence sat heavy between us. I poured him coffee, my hands steady though my heart raced. "You look different," he said. "So do you." He looked around the diner, taking in the worn furniture, the smell of frying bacon. "You still working here?" I nodded. "Still working, still surviving. You?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile people wear when they want to show success. "I own a few businesses now, construction mostly. Got a house near the city." He paused, then added carefully, "And a family." I felt that familiar sting, the kind that never really heals. but I kept my voice calm. "I'm glad," I said. "I always hoped you'd build something out of what I gave up." He blinked. "What you gave up?" I leaned closer, my eyes meeting his. "Do you even remember? The scholarship, the nights I worked so you could study, the necklace I sold so you could afford your first semester." His face turned pale. "Nayeli, that was a lifetime ago. We were kids. You can't hold on to that forever." I laughed quietly, the sound brittle. "No, Eli, you held on to what I gave you forever. My dreams, my faith, my future. You just forgot my name." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I didn't forget, I just had to move on." "Move on?" I said softly. "You didn't move on, Eli. You erased me." For a moment, I saw guilt flicker in his face, but pride buried it quickly. "You don't understand what it was like. The city changed me. I couldn't come back here." I shook my head. "You could have. You just didn't want to." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I didn't come here to fight. I was just passing through." I nodded. "Then keep passing." As he stood up to leave, something in his expression softened. "You know, I used to think about you sometimes," he said. "Wonder what happened to you." I smiled sadly. "Now you know. I kept my promise. I stayed by the lake." He hesitated, then walked out. The bell above the door jingled as the cold air rushed in, and with it, the echo of every "what if" I'd buried. That night, I sat by my window again, the same way I used to when I was young. Outside, the moon hung low, tired and heavy. I thought about what people say, that time heals all wounds. But they never tell you what to do when the scars still ache in silence. I told myself that was the end, that I'd seen him, said my piece, and could finally rest. But life wasn't done testing me. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name and handwriting I'd know even in the dark. It read, "Nayeli, I can't stop thinking about that day. I know I hurt you more than words can fix, but please, meet me one last time. There's something I need to tell you." I sat there, the paper trembling in my hands. My heart wanted to rip it apart, but my soul whispered something else. Sometimes the answers we avoid are the ones that haunt us forever. And though I didn't know it then, that letter would lead me to the most painful and liberating truth of my life. When I first read that letter, I wanted to burn it, to watch it curl and darken in the flame, the same way love had burned out of me years ago. But I couldn't. I folded it carefully, placed it under my pillow, and tried to sleep. Yet every time I closed my eyes, his words echoed. "Something I need to tell you." It's strange how the heart betrays reason. After everything he'd done, some part of me still needed to know why. For 3 nights, I fought myself. One part whispered, "Don't go, Nayeli. Let ghosts stay buried." The other whispered, "You've lived your life with questions. Don't die with them." On the 4th morning, I decided. I wrote back 2 words only, "I'll come." We met by the lake, our lake, where the water still mirrored the sky and the air still smelled of pine and memory. I walked slowly, leaning on my cane, my bones heavier than before. Eli stood there waiting, hands in his coat pockets, his breath rising in small clouds. He looked older too, like guilt had carved lines deeper than time ever could. When he saw me, his eyes softened. "You came," he said. "I almost didn't," I replied. Letters from the past can be dangerous things. He gave a small, sad smile. "You always did speak in poetry." "Poetry doesn't heal betrayal, Eli," I said quietly. So tell me what you came to say. He looked down at the ground, then out over the lake. You deserve to know the truth. Back then, when you came to the city, it wasn't just pride that kept me from you. It was her. Her, my wife, he said softly, the one you met at the door. She wasn't just someone I fell for. She came from a family that owned the company I dreamed of working for. Her father offered me everything I wanted: success, money, stability. But on one condition. I stared at him, my stomach sinking. That you leave me. He nodded slowly. He told me I was holding on to a past that didn't fit my future. He said no one would take me seriously if I brought a reservation girl into the city. I told myself it was just temporary, that once I was established I'd come back for you. But then she got pregnant, and I couldn't turn back. I wanted to cry, to shout, to hit him, but my voice came out calm, almost cold. So you traded love for comfort. He nodded again. I told myself it was survival. Survival, I echoed. You call it survival. I call it erasure. He looked at me with eyes full of regret. Nayeli, I thought I was doing what was best. I thought you'd move on, find someone who could give you more than I ever could. More, I whispered. I didn't want more, Eli. I just wanted you. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Only the wind moved, brushing against the surface of the lake. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a turquoise necklace. My breath caught. My grandmother's necklace, I said, my voice trembling. I bought it back years ago, he said, from the same pawn shop. I wanted to return it to you, but I didn't know how. Every time I tried, shame stopped me. I reached out and took it, feeling the cold metal against my palm. You can't return something that's already cursed with memory, I said softly. He lowered his eyes. I'm dying, Nayeli. The words struck like lightning. What? He nodded. Heart disease. The doctors say it's only a matter of time. Maybe that's why I wrote to you. I needed to make things right before I go. I stared at him. This man I once would have died for. He looked smaller now, fragile. Yet my heart didn't ache the same way. It was as if the pain had finally burned itself out. You came looking for forgiveness, I said. Yes, he whispered, but I don't expect it. Good, I said, because forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Do you still hate me? I thought for a moment. No, I stopped hating you long ago. You can't hate what's already gone. What I feel now is pity. He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping. I deserve that. I took a deep breath. Do you remember what you told me the night before you left? You said, we'll build our dreams together. Well, Eli, I did build something. Just not with you. I built peace, and that's something you can't take away. He smiled weakly. I'm glad you found peace. As I turned to leave, his voice called after me. Nayeli, do you ever think we could have made it if things were different? I didn't look back. No, Eli, because the kind of love that leaves you behind was never love at all. I walked away, feeling lighter than I had in years. The necklace still rested in my hand, a ghost of the past I had finally faced. That night, I sat by my window again, the same one where I'd watched decades slip by. I hung the necklace by the curtain, letting the moonlight fall across it. It no longer looked like a wound. It looked like closure. And though I didn't know it then, the next chapter of my story was about to begin, one where love would come knocking again, not from the past, but from a place I never expected, because life in its strange way, was not done teaching me about love and loss yet. 3 months passed after that day by the lake. The snow melted, the river thawed, and the spring returned to the valley, but my heart remained quiet, too quiet. I thought I'd buried everything that ever connected me to Eli beneath that frozen ground. I told myself I had no more tears left to give, but one morning I received another letter. It came in a plain white envelope, the handwriting shaky, uneven, his. I recognized it the instant I saw my name written across it, Nayeli. For a long moment, I simply stared at it. My fingers trembled, and the paper felt heavier than it should have, like it carried something that could tilt my world again. I thought of throwing it in the fire. I even struck a match. But then I sighed, blew the flame out, and opened it. The first line took my breath away. If you're reading this, it means I've gone where I can no longer hurt you. My hands trembled. I won't ask for forgiveness again. I've done enough asking in this lifetime. But before I go, I need to tell you the truth I couldn't say when I saw you last. I read every word as if they were wounds reopening, slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. You once asked if I ever loved you. The truth is, I never stopped. I didn't know how to live with the love I buried, so I lived without it instead. But I carried it like a stone in my pocket every day for decades. Every success felt hollow. Every birthday, every Christmas, your face was there. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. My wife passed 5 years ago. I thought that might bring me peace. It didn't. It only made me see that all the years I'd built were a lie to protect myself from shame. You deserved more, Nayeli. You deserved someone who could have stood beside you when the world looked down on you. You deserved a love that didn't hide. Tears blurred my vision, falling silently onto the paper. When we met by the lake, I wanted to ask you something, but I didn't have the right. Now I'll say it here. Will you scatter my ashes there where we once promised each other forever? I can't rest anywhere else. Maybe this way I can finally be part of something pure, something I broke. The letter ended with a small, trembling signature. Eli. I pressed it against my chest, feeling my heart ache like it hadn't in years. For hours, I sat in silence. The world outside moved on. Birds sang, wind brushed through the pines. But inside, I was lost in memories of a man I had spent a lifetime trying to forget. When I finally looked up, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore, not even sad. What I felt was release. 2 weeks later, a small box arrived, sent by his attorney. Inside was a sealed urn, simple, unadorned, and a note that said, "As he requested, so I went." The lake looked the same as always, still, blue, eternal. The wind whispered across the water, the way it did the day we met as children. I knelt by the edge, my knees stiff, my hands shaking. I opened the urn, and the ashes danced out, swirling in the breeze before settling on the surface of the lake. "Go on, Eli," I whispered. "This time, don't look back." The ashes rippled across the water, breaking apart, fading into the deep. I stayed there for hours, maybe the whole day. When I finally stood, something in me had shifted. I didn't feel emptiness anymore. I felt light. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in years. But when I woke, something strange had happened. Under my window, where I'd hung my grandmother's turquoise necklace, a small bird had built a nest. 3 tiny eggs lay inside, blue as the morning sky. I smiled. It felt like life whispering, "You're not done yet." A few days later, as I walked through the market in town, a man approached me. He was in his late 70s, tall, with gentle eyes and a camera hanging from his neck. He smiled kindly and said, "You look familiar. Have we met before?" I laughed softly. "Maybe in another lifetime." He chuckled. "Then maybe it's time we meet in this one." His name was Samuel, a widower who'd spent his life photographing forgotten places and faces. We started talking that day, about the sky, about memories, about loss. There was no spark, no instant love, no grand promise, just warmth. The kind that doesn't burn, but stays. Over the weeks, he'd visit. We'd sit by the same window, sipping tea, watching the evening light fade. He never asked about my past, and I never asked about his. We just existed, peacefully. One evening, as he was leaving, he looked at me and said, "You know, you have a storyteller's soul." I smiled, maybe because my story's been too long. He nodded gently. "Then maybe it's time you start telling it." That night, for the first time in my life, I picked up a pen, not to write letters I'd never send, but to write my story. I began with a line that felt like truth finally spoken. I was a woman who sold her dreams for his future, but I found my soul when he erased me from his life. And as I wrote, I realized some endings are just disguised beginnings. The days that followed felt different, not lighter exactly, but steadier. Like my heart had finally learned how to walk again after years of crawling through grief. The nights no longer echoed with memories that clawed their way through silence. Instead, I began to dream again, not of what was lost, but of what was left. Every morning, I'd wake before dawn, light a candle, and sit by the window. The same desk where I once cried over Eli's letters now held my notebook, the one where I began to write our story. But this time, I wasn't writing for him. I was writing for me, for every woman who gave up her dreams for love and was left behind in the shadow of someone else's success. Each word I wrote felt like a wound healing, not reopening. I wrote about the girl who wanted to dance barefoot in the dust of summer fairs, about the woman who painted the walls of her small house with prayers she didn't know how to say out loud, about the lover who watched the man she believed in walk away with her dreams in his hands. And I wrote about the old woman, me, who finally learned that forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about setting yourself free. Sometimes Samuel would visit while I wrote. He'd bring fresh bread or roasted corn, sit by the fire, and quietly flip through his photographs. "You look peaceful when you write," he'd say, and I'd smile. Maybe peace comes when we finally stop chasing apologies. One evening, as the wind howled through the canyon, I showed him a few pages of what I'd written. He read them slowly, his eyes softening with every paragraph. When he looked up, there was something shimmering in them. Not pity, not sadness, just respect. "This," he said quietly, "isn't just your story, Nayeli. It's every woman's story who ever loved too much." That night, I cried. But not from pain, from release, because for the first time, someone saw me not as a memory, not as a relic of a forgotten love, but as a woman who lived. Months passed. My story grew, 50 pages, then 100. Each chapter felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I thought had died decades ago. And then one morning, I received a letter. This time not from Eli, not from the past, but from a small local publisher in Santa Fe. Samuel had secretly sent them my manuscript. They wanted to publish it. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, my heart racing like it hadn't in years. The letter trembled in my hands, the ink blurring from my tears. After 74 years, I whispered, maybe my voice will finally be heard. The book came out that autumn. The cover was simple, a sketch of an old woman's hand releasing a paper bird into the sky. The title read, What I Gave Away. At first I didn't think anyone would care, but slowly letters started arriving. Women from reservations, small towns, distant cities, all writing the same thing. You told my story. Some wrote that they had left their own dreams behind for men who never looked back. Others said my words made them forgive themselves for choices they thought had ruined their lives. I read every letter. Some made me smile, others made me ache, but all of them reminded me that pain, when shared, becomes less heavy. One evening, Samuel came over holding 2 copies of my book. They're asking you to sign these, he said with a grin. You're officially an author now. I laughed, shaking my head. At 74, imagine that. He smiled softly. You didn't write to become famous, Nayeli. You wrote to become free, and that freedom, it's contagious. That night, we walked together down to the lake. The sun was sinking, painting the sky in shades of gold and ash, the same colors that once carried Eli away. I brought a single copy of the book with me and laid it by the water's edge. This is for you, I whispered. You erased me, but in doing so, you gave me the space to find myself again. The wind carried the scent of wild sage, and for a moment, I swear I heard laughter. Distant, familiar. Maybe it was just the wind. Or maybe it was him. I turned to Samuel, who was watching the horizon. Do you ever think we meet people for a reason? I asked. He nodded. Always, some to love us, some to break us, and a few to help us rebuild. I smiled. Then maybe you're my rebuild. He chuckled softly. Maybe we both are. We stood in silence, the world quiet around us, and I realized something. Love doesn't always end in a shared life. Sometimes it ends in a story that keeps living long after the lovers are gone. Months later, the book found its way far beyond what I ever imagined. Radio shows, libraries, even classrooms. Young women quoted my lines, old ones wrote me letters of thanks. And though my hands grew weaker and my steps slower, my spirit felt stronger than ever. One morning, a girl about 20 came to my home. She held the book to her chest and said, Miss Nayeli, your story stopped me from giving up. I looked at her, her eyes full of hope and hurt, and smiled. Then don't give up, child. Life might take everything from you, but never let it take your chance to start again. As she left, I looked out toward the lake, its waters still and endless. You see that, Eli? I whispered. You erased me once, but look how brightly I shine now. The candle by the window flickered, and in that moment, I knew he heard me. I closed my notebook that night with one final line. I was once a woman who gave everything for love. Now I am a woman who found love in everything she gave. And as I set down my pen, I looked into the camera, because yes, I knew this story would reach far beyond this little cabin. And I said softly, tell me, my dear listener, have you ever given too much for someone who never looked back? Have you ever lost yourself in love, only to find yourself years later stronger than ever? If my story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, comment and subscribe, because I promise you, the next story will remind you, no pain lasts forever, Not even the one you thought would. The candle burned low. The bird outside sang one last note, and I smiled, because even in endings I had finally found peace.